Well, Shannon, I wanted to sit down with you because I got the privilege of watching the Essential Church movie the other night, like a behind-the-scenes secret showing.
Yeah.
I brought my son with me. He's 9, and we haven't talked about this yet, but can I front-load you first with some of the takeaways?
Please.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we're sitting there. Also with Tim Stevens, who's in the movie, who went to prison for refusing to stop preaching. Watching the movie, didn't know what to expect, wondering if it's going to be documentary, wonder if it's going to be sort of a John MacArthur, biography, a COVID-heavy thing, and what we saw was different than anything I would have imagined. Church history, dealt with COVID, truth, the gospel, a lot of other key storylines that were unpacked, almost a behind the scenes too of how churches went through challenges. But the biggest takeaway, when I went home that night and as I was driving home with my son and I was getting his feedback at 9 years old, he's pretty much parroting to me, so Dad, we want to obey the government when it's biblical and reasonable, but if they tell us we can't worship, and if they tell us we can't do church and we can't follow Jesus and we can't preach, we disobey. We follow God, not government for that, right? Like that's what we do. And I'm going, okay, they did their job. Remarkable. Can you take me into the big why and then the big what? Why the film? Why put all this energy, time, money, and do this? And then what is it about? And because people may think, oh, it's a grace community thing or a COVID thing.
Yeah.
Talk to me about the why and the what.
Yeah, so the why is, during the lockdowns and when we decided to open back up, a lot of people left our church. There was a lot of division in our church, and it was hard to communicate to those folks what was actually happening, what was the process to get to the point where we decided to open back up. And I think a lot of people, even people that maybe attended our church, think that just, John MacArthur runs everything and he was just like, go do this, But there was a process that we had to go through. And I don't think people understand we're an elder-ruled church, but our elders have to be unanimous when making decisions. So we have 40 elders, and they all had to become unanimous that we were going to open up, and they weren't unanimous. And so they were unanimous in saying we will heed the government's warning. And sure, and John MacArthur says in the documentary, it was like if somebody said a hurricane was coming, let's say we're in Florida, we'd be like, okay, well, we need to pack up and go, so we're not going to see anybody this Sunday. And it was like that. But when you realize the hurricane wasn't really what they said it was, then it's like, okay, well, we can go back now. And John MacArthur was ready to go back, but the rest of the elders, not necessarily. So there was a lot of division and disunity in that regard, and trying to figure out what we're going to do with Romans 13 and when we obey the government and stuff like that. So the why is, I don't think people understand what all went behind the curtain, what went on behind the curtain, and the documentary pulls that back.
It totally does.
Yeah. So that's nice for our part of the story. The other part of the story, I guess maybe this is a why still, is we want to show that this is not a local church story, but it's the church story. And that's why I really want to involve church history, and I want to involve the global aspect, which our Canadian brothers represent. Weaving in and out of that throughout the story, and it really worked out to be a good combination, and it worked out well. Yeah,
it was incredible to get the behind-the-scenes glimpse. I remember as I was watching it thinking, okay, they just did something very helpful, very authentic, and then I'll use the V word, vulnerable. A lot of people, and it's a caricature, it's not accurate at all, but they think that Grace Community and that group are MacArthurites. They'll call seminarians like me and other guys from Masters MacArthurites or robots, or it's, single elder rule. I mean, he's the man and he's the big celebrity pastor. All of those are caricatures. What you guys did legitimately is take us behind the scenes and show us that every elder team has to pray and seek the Lord's wisdom and pray that the Holy Spirit would unify that group in decision making. You took us behind the scenes, even with some of the questions that they were asking. And then to the wisdom, this came through really clear in the film. Anybody who would say, oh, they just were cavalier, they don't care about people, you didn't love your neighbor, you just, who cares if people die, all of that, there's no thought given, what a bravado, would be foolish to think such things, because it even explains the way that the men wisely and prudently and carefully closed for a short time, assessed the situation, and then went, okay, it's not bubonic plague. No one's dying in the streets. You know, the pastors aren't going to go out there and hold people as they die on the sidewalks, and this great virus is going to clear the earth. And even opening back up is so clear. You really get the sense that Grace Community Church operates with plurality, and here's why I say that's so helpful. So many elder teams and churches, including ours, watch the way others do things. Not that we wouldn't look at the Bible ourselves, but you look at the way older, wiser, seasoned men carry themselves. And the decision-making process was biblical, it was real, it was prayerful. So that really came through the film. I think maybe whether you guys intended to or not, I think you just gave an entire new generation of pastors and churches a really helpful roadmap for, you will have challenges, you won't always all agree, here's how to navigate those things. Talk to me a little bit about what it was like to hear the stories firsthand from both James Coates and Tim Stevens, who both are highlighted in the film, both went to prison, both had their families run through the ringer. Talk to me about what it was like for you personally as you're hearing the stories and the emotions and thoughts as you process all that.
Yeah, well, you know, as a storyteller, stakes are important. And anything that communicates the stakes well, you need to have that in your story. And there were stakes for us, but you know, clearly there was a hedge around us at our church. We were somewhat protected. We were threatened with imprisonment, but the LAPD wasn't going to do it. Now, move forward in the future, and maybe that changes, and we all get arrested, and we're in the same boat. You know, we're doing the same thing. So but we get to actually see that with the Canadians and what they went through. So as a story plot person, I'm crafting this story, I have to have that in there. As a Christian, I look at that and I think, wow, these guys had to understand what the costs were, and they had to make a decision. Like, look, those guys have nice lives, right? I'm not nice. I mean, they have a home.
Totally.
They have a house. They have a wife. They have children. They're enjoying their life. They're doing what they love to do.
Absolutely.
And they don't want that ripped away from them. And they are now threatened with maximum security prison. And at the time, you know, you don't know how long you're going to be in there.
No.
It could be 5 years or more. And they're threatened with that. And the police come to your door and knock, knock, knock. I'm ripping you away from your kids and family. I'm putting you in a police car, and we're taking you to maximum security prison because you refuse to stop preaching. And that just struck me, because they have to look at their temporary setting, which is really nice, and say, but Christ is more important, and his kingdom is more important. The future that I have in Christ outweighs what I have right now, the blessings that I have right now. You know, and it's like that parable where the man finds the treasure in the property, and he sells everything he has to buy that property, because the treasure that's in that property is so much more valuable than everything else in his life. And you have to see Christ and the gospel that way, and they did. And it wasn't easy, but it was, you know, a challenge, and they passed that test. And it emboldens me. It makes me ponder those things. Am I thinking that way? It was very challenging. And so just going through those interviews and seeing the emotion they had behind it, these guys are authentic. Authentic Christian men, and you know, we need that.
So good. Okay, another fun behind the scenes question I have for you. How much did you leave on the cutting room floor?
Oh my goodness.
This is like the pain of every director. And by the way, in no relation to movie making, it's the pain of every pastor. We're sitting in study, you got, 5, 6, 7,000 word manuscript, you got to trim it down. The cutting room floor is where maybe in today's world, good podcast episodes and good video clips come for the pastors now that'll use media. But for you as a director, I mean, you got probably some gold just sitting there even still. How hard was that? What was the decision-making process like as you look at MacArthur or Riccardi or Chris Hamilton or even James and Tim, some of these guys saying things and describing things? How did you decide what to leave in and what to pull out?
Yeah, there's two things that are at war there. It's what I know that some people will want to see, and then what I know is good for telling a story. You know, and so I have to get what needs to be there, but at the same time not abandon the craft of filmmaking, the craft of storytelling, visually telling a story. And so I think that's a mistake that a lot of Christians in the industry can make, is they get wrapped up in trying to sermonize it and say, well, look, but is that the best way to tell the story? You know, maybe that wouldn't be how the sermon would go, but I'm not crafting a sermon, I'm crafting a movie. You know, so I'm thinking of it in those terms. At the same time, I have to be true to what I know it should be said. But there are things that I was trying to put in there that, for example, I had a lot more data stuff in there, the science part of it. And it's fascinating. But there came a point where I'm like, this is indirectly involved, but it's become a rabbit trail. What is the spine of my story here with my protagonist, the church? Do I just go off on Fauci for the next 30 minutes?
I'm sure there's some people that are like, why didn't he go harder there?
I know.
Or go after Newsom or whoever
If some
else.
of the people saw what I left on the floor, I'm afraid to show them. They're going to be like, I don't understand why that's not in the film.
It's not a political COVID documentary. It's not that. It's not the point.
And there is a point to that too. I have like COVID fatigue. And political COVID fatigue. And I know where I stand on all of it. And I think a lot of other people are like that too. So if I just told that story and just reaffirm what people already have come to the conclusion about, I don't think that's as valuable. And that's not really the story. The story's about the church.
Amen.
So if I said it was about the church and I spent all this time just with the scientists, that doesn't really make sense.
Totally. I think if people walked away from the story, that's why I shared the story about my son earlier, is we didn't get in the car and go, man, the government lies to us. Or he didn't get in and go, man, I can't trust anyone, Dad, or who's this Newsom guy, or whatever. It was all about the church and our devotion to God.
That's right.
You did that so well in the film. Can I ask you a question that may engage a criticism and a false caricature that will come? Is, this Shannon guy and Grace Productions and, typical, whatever. John MacArthur made a movie about himself. And all this is meant to do is sort of stack the deck on, we won, look what we did, we never do anything wrong, and just sort of cover it. Can you speak to that? And I know it's something that doesn't really deserve a ton of engagement, but from the heart of a man who both loves his church and plays fair, what would be your response and your engagement to some thought that this is a J-Mac thing that he just said, do it, make a movie about me?
Yeah, so I don't think it was his idea. Although he was savvy enough that during this was all happening, he was like, why aren't we filming this stuff?
Yeah.
He's like, film the tent, start filming this stuff. We need to record this just for church history aspects. But he didn't say documentary or anything like that. Absolutely. He just was like, we need to be on top of this because this is a historical thing.
And that's normal. Pastors, I do that at my church when if we have several baptisms. Like, hey guys, will you make sure to take a photo? Of these Like, this is incredible. Some of these people will put this on their mantle. The Lord's doing something here.
Yeah, exactly.
That's normal.
Yeah, it's like church history stuff, and you should have like a historian in the church, if you will. We need to make sure that we're recording what's happening right now.
Absolutely.
So there's that aspect of it. But honestly, when I pitched how I was wanting to do this story to him, he is so hands off. He did not. In fact, he said, just don't make it about me. That's what he said.
Typical.
And on top of that, he did not micromanage me at all. In fact, I think it's really rare, honestly, in a corporate setting, whether it's Grace or whatever church, it doesn't matter. It's still a corporate setting because you're dealing with a plurality of all these different people.
Got structures.
Yeah, and I was left alone. And it was such a blessing that I was left alone. I mean, I knew my responsibility, and I knew, if you will, my client, the church, the elders, I knew what they wanted, and I've been there since the late 90s, so I know it just as well as anybody. I know I'm not some outsider. So there's that aspect of it, but he did not micromanage me. He did not have his hand in this. He did not see it until it was completely finished, and I showed him there, and he was... And like I said, if he had, he'd probably want certain things, but he didn't do that.
Wow.
And then he was like, you did a great job. I love it the way it is. let's go
I
with it.
heard about one moment privately that people will see in the movie, but when a certain individual, great storyline and is a good guy, said something in the interview and was in the room with Pastor John and just looked over at him as it was on screen. I mean, there were some incredible moments you captured. What was the personal response from Pastor John afterwards as he's seeing all of it there?
Yeah.
And doesn't say, take that out. So-and-so questioned me, take that out. This actually makes us look like it took us so many meetings, or I don't want people to think that he let the biblical principles and the truthful storyline unfold.
Yeah.
What was his personal response like?
So we did our post-production with Kappa Studios in Burbank, and they have a nice finishing room, which means they also have a nice theater, projector, and 5.1 sound, recliner chairs. And so we presented it to some of the key elders involved in this, John MacArthur being one of them that day. And it was nerve-wracking up to that point.
I can imagine.
Because that point was like, okay, what are they going to say? Like, am I going to have tons of notes to change things? Are they going to think it's too long? Or, all this kind of stuff. And so they watched it, and I sat behind them, watching them watch it. And I remember one part where it came up, and it says the argument. And I heard John MacArthur go, And I was like, okay. He's engaged, because he was like, oh, that's good. I could tell he was like, I approve of this chapter title. We're going to get into the argument.
Those chapter title things were so helpful because you felt like you were walking through a narrative.
Yeah.
And if you're a reader, you like headers.
Yeah.
If you're a movie watcher, it's so nice when they put the location. Or the, Just a side note, a nerd moment is you did well with those.
Thank you. Yeah, I decided that. I had that idea early on, then I kind of abandoned it, and then the last month I put them back in. And it's something you can kind of hang your hat on mentally, and it helps the audience.
Following.
Yeah. So afterwards, after he watched it, I walked around the front, and he said to Jacob was there as well. He said, I knew you guys were good, but I didn't know you guys were transcendent.
Wow. That's a compliment.
Yeah.
That's a compliment.
I was like, okay, that's good. And he said a lot of really good things. He just went on and on about, wow, this is amazing. This is so good. Like, he was really floored. Chris Hamilton was there.
Yep.
I could tell he was a little emotional from it, and it was great. And then I was thinking, are they just saying that, or because, we spent a lot of time on this, and clearly we did a lot of work.
No one wants to insult your artwork.
Exactly. But then I heard from other people, he said the same thing, and then he would say to them, and I'm not just saying that, I mean what I say. And so he really gave us really high compliments. And that was really the main point. At the end of the day, he's essentially like, the elders are essentially like the executive producers in this. If they don't like it, then I failed. And they liked it. So that was a breath of fresh air. I was like, whew, that's good. Glad that's over.
That's so good. How can churches, people get involved? I get a lot of questions already on this.
Yeah.
From our church, from folks online saying, where can we watch it? When can we watch it? What's the process? I feel like I could ask you the nerdy behind the scenes questions for another hour.
Yeah.
But I need to ask you what people probably want to know.
Yeah.
Where can I watch it? And then after maybe the premiere and all of the releases, will it be like American Gospel and some of these other films where they're on Amazon Prime or Netflix or something? Or is that in the works? Where can people jump on board?
Yeah, so that is all in the works. We're working on that. We don't know exactly as far as streaming where it's going to end up. Eventually it will be on DVD and Blu-ray. And
awesome.
You'll be able to get that. And it'll have extra bonus features. So some of those things that I said, Scott Atlas, some of that raw interview footage will be included in that. And so they'll get to see some more of that, which is, it's fascinating. As far as theater release, so our website is essentialchurchmovie.com, and you can subscribe, put your email in there, and you'll get updated with information as it comes in.
Fantastic.
We just signed 70 theaters, closed meaning we closed the deal with 70 theaters just yesterday, and that puts us at 150 theaters right now.
Wow.
So our goal is to get 800, 900 theaters across the U.S.
Yep.
So that's going to happen a lot in the next 6 to 7 days.
What helps to do that? Churches getting on board, people watching this, going to click, and
that's a good point. Like when the theater becomes available, you can look on like Fandango or whatever. You can put in your zip code and see if there's a theater near you and how close. And then if you go and start bugging them, I want to buy tickets now and pre-sale, then they'll be like, wow, all these people are calling us for pre-sales. And they're going to go, okay, well, let's put it on another screen, and other theaters will want it. So we're with Cinemark, Regal, and AMC. So those are some big theaters that we're with. So they're going to add them as they see the desire for the movie in more theaters.
Awesome.
So yeah, pre-sales will help us. There's no way for us to measure that, but look, the best way is you're just going to have to be diligent in going to our website and going to those 3, Cinemark, Regal, and AMC.
Yep.
Use apps like Fandango. I don't know what else they use. I use Fandango. You put in your zip code and you can see and like the name of the movie and then theaters near you, and it brings them all up.
Awesome.
Like I did that just yesterday, and it brought up like 2 AMCs in walking distance of my house, which is kind of surreal. Because I go and watch movies there, and I'm like, I'm gonna go and watch my own movie at that theater.
That's pretty awesome.
This is gonna be weird. I'm gonna buy popcorn and sit down and watch.
There you go. You can actually relax finally. It'll be out. It's done.
It'll be weird.
Oh, it's so good. Well, brother, thank you for your work. Thank you for your faithfulness. Thank you for even, you can say, taking a step of faith and risking what is, number one, not very common in the conservative Bible church, theologically conservative world, that you're going to make a movie. For your use of media and your use of your creative gifts, phenomenal. And just for me personally, I would want to say thank you, because it really, just to put it in layman's terms, it stinks that the false teachers, the bad ministries, the people with bad theology have big money, and they go buy the 6K cameras, and they go buy the expensive equipment, and they have the studio and the set, and they hire people galore, and they use media so well, but they're pumping out heresy and blasphemy. And then while we believe in the sovereignty of God, sometimes I think in our theological world, we think, well, God's sovereign, he'll do it. I'm just going to preach, and we just need to be faithful. And that is true. But God's given us these mediums. And so I'm thankful for MacArthur. I'm thankful for Grace Community. I'm thankful that years ago they decided to do radio. And throughout the years, they've chosen to continually be faithful stewards, and your gifts put to work, and all the energy that you've put in with this team. So thank you for that. I have one last huge question. How in the world did you get Ian Hamilton?
I know.
And land on him as a narrator? Shouldn't you just put him on the payroll to narrate everything? Can't he narrate the sermons? I mean, the intros.
He killed it. He was so good.
He's amazing.
Yeah, and there's an example of the sovereignty of God right there, because he was really, he's going to see this, I don't want to hurt his feelings, but he was like 5th in line. But not because we didn't want him, because we didn't know he was there. And I kept asking for certain people, and that didn't work out, and that didn't work out. And then Mark Z was like, well, I called a Banner of Truth guy, and he says Ian could do it, this Ian Hamilton guy.
Providence of God.
I'm like, okay. I'm like, he's Scottish. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I was desperate at that point.
The best voice, demeanor, his look. I mean, when that camera, that initial zoom, and you have the wall, just the whole thing, it grips.
We were there for like, I know we have to cut this pretty soon, but we were there for like, 4 or 5 hours interviewing him. And the crew at the time was like, man, this is going to be boring. And I'm looking at it, because I know in my head what I'm going to do. I'm like, oh, he's giving me gold. And then when I edit it together, he does such a good job. He's perfect. He clearly, it's like when he talks about these stories of the Covenanters in church history, it's like he's related to them, like it's his daughter or his brother or his sister. And he's just so authentic, and he did a great job. And the movie would not be what it is without him.
Fantastic. The B-roll, the stool, I don't want to give anything away. Just wow. Wow. So, all right, for those of you watching this, essentialchurchmovie.com. Plug in your zip code, talk to your pastor, your church, push hard online, call local theaters, and continue to use the resource. This movie is going to be an incredible, incredible blessing to the church. Shannon, to you, your team, all of you guys, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and talking about this. I appreciate it.
Yep.